Chair, would like to call this meeting to order.
Okay, I will call the Charter Commission meeting of Thursday, 2025 to order. We need a roll call or I can't remember on this.
I don't know that we need roll call, Chair, but it's helpful to get the,
Okay.
for the recording secretary.
Yeah. We can do that then.
Rod Axtell. Ronald Barnes.
Here.
Karen Lundquist. Hussein Dahir. John Eagle.
Here.
Kathy Gustafson she indicated that she was unable to attend. Cynthia Hunt. Here. Brana Lindell. Here. Jamil Muzraja.
Here.
Jeannie McGovern. Emily Melby.
Here.
I haven't perfected this name yet. Lingafala Orihu. Peterson.
Here.
Michael Ramirez.
Here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Mark Thorson.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. So before we get started on the agenda, I want to welcome Michael to the Charter Commission. And typically what we do when we have somebody new is we kind of go around and introduce ourselves. So I'll kind of kick it off and just kind of go around this way and take a question. So I'm Steve Peterson. I think I've been cursed of being the chair for 2 years now. And Mark decided to give it up and I didn't quickly enough propose somebody else to do it. My history kind of with being involved in kind of city affairs is I got involved in the Planning Commission in 1996. I was elected to the city council starting in 2000, and I was in the city council from 2000 until the beginning of 2014. And I'm involved in the Charter Commission, and I'm also a member of the Board of the Port Authority at the city. So Jamil.
Jamil Masrujai. I've been on the commission for almost 2 years now, which is surprising. It's me, first commission for me in the city of Bloomington. So
Cool.
Mark Thorson. I've been on a number of commissions over many years, primarily planning, housing and redevelopment authority, and now the Charter Commission.
Mike Ramirez. Lived in Bloomington since 2017. Work in city government. I work in Parks and Recreation. I used to work for the city of Bloomington and now I work for the city of Egan. So happy to be here. Yeah.
Welcome.
I live here.
I do still live here. Yes.
That's the important.
Yes, absolutely.
Otherwise, we'd have to take a look.
I do live here. I have, my loyalty is to Bloomington, folks.
Sign the old.
There we go. Well, welcome.
John Eagle, I think this is my second year on, and heating air conditioning business in Bloomington, lived here for 46 years, I think it is now. So, welcome.
Emily Melby. I've lived in Bloomington since 2014 and have been on the Charter Commission for 2 years.
Cynthia Hunt, many years ago was on the Planning Commission. Had the pleasure of serving at various points with Mark and Steve. And then started on this many years ago after planning, and also was on the board of the Bloomington Convention of Visitors Bureau too. And then I've also been on the Port Authority as a commissioner for a number of years. So welcome to our group.
Hi, Michael. I'm Ronald Lindell, and I've been a member of this commission. I think I'm into my second term now. So what are we, 4-year, 5-year terms? But anyway, that's what I'm at. Yeah. And I too did work in municipal government for 40 years. I worked for the city of South St. Paul as the community development director, housing authority director. So I come with some background in government, and I've lived in Bloomington since 1987.
I'm Ronald Barnes. I've been on the commission my second term, I think. Lived in Bloomington for 30 years. And I'm happy to be here.
Jamie Hansen, City Clerk.
And I'm Melissa Manderscheid, Charter Attorney, and I'm coming up on my 9th anniversary with the city of Bloomington.
Oh, that's amazing.
Time flies when you're having fun.
I'll call 2.1, the periodic review of the city charter. Take it away.
All right, Chair and members, endeavor to share my screen. I made a PowerPoint slide, which is in your packet. Whoops, I keep using the wrong mouse. Which is in your packet. And sure. So we have, as you recall, we've been marching through the charter, chapter by chapter, and at our last meeting, we covered a couple of chapters, specifically 2 and 6. And during the meeting tonight, we are looking into chapter 5, which, if you might remember, talks about initiative, referendum, and review, or recall, excuse me. So we're doing chapter 5 here. We've got 12 total chapters, and we'll be tackling the next 3 more chapters next year. Right? As you recall, we showed this slide at the last meeting to highlight the quantity of sections in this particular chapter and the reason that we're having it as a standalone. And so we're gonna, as we have done with each of these conversations, we're gonna go section by section, interrupt at any time with questions. And I have the city clerk here, and I appreciate her participation in this conversation as well. As you'll see, almost every section involves some action by the city council, our city clerk. So it's helpful to have her here. And she's done some number crunching as well. That'll be helpful for us. All right, next slide. All right, any questions before we get started? Section 1. All right. So section 1 talks about, at a high level, the powers of the people. As we've talked about in the past, the essence of a city charter is that you have reserved powers for the people, and they are able to have special powers that a statutory city they would not have. So specifically, and not every charter city has all 3 of these powers. In Bloomington, you have all 3 in your charter. You have initiative, and I'll explain these in really simplistic terms, and you'll see them fleshed out more as we go through the chapter. But essentially, I think you can think of as initiative as the power to start something, the power to make law. Similar to like the legislature, it's the ability to initiate new laws. Referendum, or as we see here, referral, is the power to pull back on a law that the council has already acted on. So essentially like a veto power of an existing law. And then recall is the power to remove officials. All right. And those terms are roughly the same in every charter in Minnesota that uses these powers. All right. So with regard to all three of these, it should come as no surprise to everyone that you can't pay people or give them a gift for their signature. That's what this section says, but it doesn't prohibit you from using legal services or consultants and that sort of outside assistance to prepare the work that's required, but you can't pay somebody or give them some sort of reward in exchange for your signature. All right. And then the council can also adopt additional regulations to implement these specific steps in this charter.
Hey, can we go back to 5.02 for a second?
Sure.
On that first sentence, it also seems like you can't be paid to circulate the petition, so you couldn't hire people to go. Is that right? You're prevented from doing that.
I think you could probably read it to mean that as well, because it says you can't, render in connection with the circulation. So yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd have to be your committee and it's volunteer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not like you can't pay yourself.
All right.
So if people have questions, just wave your hand.
All right, so this is the first batch of sections that have to do with initiative. So, and you'll see some, a couple of years ago, you look at the history down here, a couple of years ago, we went through in response to some questions from citizens. We did, some of you might remember, we did a bit of cleanup in chapter 5 and tried to create some commonalities between these so that it wasn't such a unique process with each one of them. So for example, we created a petition form for each of them, things like that, just to help people achieve what they were trying to achieve, because we were getting a little bit of feedback that people didn't necessarily understand. So we had done some cleanup back in 21 to help people. So there is a lot of repetition, and you'll hear that. And that some of that is on purpose to try and make some of these steps the same in each of the 3. Okay, so on to the show. Okay, so each one of these has a committee that has to be formed by 5 Bloomington registered voters. They have to establish a committee. And in the instance of an initiative, they have to essentially create an ordinance, which is how we act to create laws at the city level. So they have to submit their draft ordinance to me, the city attorney, along with a purpose statement. And then I am required to approve it or put it into a legally sufficient form fit for its purpose. Or if I fail to do that, then it's considered legal and they can keep moving forward. This, I will say from my experience, comes up because there's things on the internet like petition.org and things like that. So sometimes people will circulate them and then I will find out about it. And it's unclear sometimes whether they are trying to do this process in 5.04. And so when we get something, all the staff have been reminded, like, if you see something that says petition on it, or it's seeming like it's trying to start a new law, you need to let me know right away. Because I want to get in touch with them. Oftentimes there's like a committee or some sort of organizer, and we'll get in touch with them. We'll send them a letter and say, we want to clarify that you are, are you trying to do what 5.04 is, or are you doing some other approach? So we have a system in place to address that because the clock starts ticking. All right. So if it, once it is ready to go, the ordinance is ready to go, then they have to file a copy of that with the clerk, along with the 5 names of the people on their committee. And then when they circulate the signature pages to collect signatures, they have to attach that ordinance to the signature page, as well as the names of those 5 people on the committee, the names and the addresses of them. Does that make sense? All right, next slide. So here is what that looks like. Here's a copy of the petition. Now, in some states, I think in South Dakota, they changed their law, so it has to be all one piece of paper. And so people get like huge long pieces of paper. In Bloomington, it can be multiple pieces of paper, but they all have to be exactly the same. And so when they pull them all together, they submit the city clerk a ginormous stack of these signature pages. And they fill in the blanks that are on this chart here to help them make them all match and comply with the process. So you'll see on here that it says for an initiative, they have to get the signatures of at least 10% of the total number of votes cast in the last preceding municipal election. So our city clerk here crunched those numbers just to give you a sense of what we're talking about for numbers. So in this particular instance, if somebody did this tomorrow, they would need 2,088 signatures from Bloomington residents. All right, any questions? Next slide. So now here's like the next step. They have to file all those signature pages at the same time with the city clerk. And then the city clerk and her staff have 10 days to look through all of them, deduplicate, try and find them on the voter rolls, And then they have to count them, make sure they meet the number that they need, calculate the number and then meet the number. If the clerk determines that it's insufficient, she notifies one member of at least one member of the committee. And she has their name and address because they had to file that with her. And then they have 30 days to fix that. And if they can't fix it within 30 days, then the clerk notifies all of the committee members to say, you were unable to do that, you have an insufficient petition. They can restart the process, or the council can decide that they just want to put it on the ballot regardless of not having met the sufficiency requirement.
Mr. Chair. A question on the previous one. Does it have to be, I think you said resident of the city, or does someone who signs a petition have to actually be a registered voter?
Registered voter.
Registered voter, okay.
So we look them all up. Our, voter.
Okay.
That question.
Yeah.
Would it be useful for you to get the telephone number and email address of the people on the committee?
Yes,
Firemen.
it would be. They are, like this last group had put a lot of time and effort into it. And so they were periodic, they were checking in with me quite often.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be a useful requirement as well.
I'm hearing,
That I would, potential change.
Okay. Write that down. Form of petition, Chair, what I'm hearing is the form of petition, add,
Wherever it says address, it would be like telephone number and.
email, or, okay, okay. Yeah, okay,
They haven't.
helpful. Right, next. We're on 5.7. All right, so now, if it's found to be sufficient by the clerk's office, the clerk transmits notice of this to the council, and we do that in an official way because, as you'll see here, the counting of days matters. So the clerk notifies the council the next time the council's getting together typically, and then the council, they, at their next meeting that they can meet, they will receive that transmittal from the clerk, and then they'll oftentimes schedule that public hearing all at that same meeting. And the public hearing is like a public hearing on an ordinance in the typical way that you have seen it done before. And then there's a clock that starts. The council must take action within 65 days of being notified from the clerk. They have to take action on that ordinance. So we publish notice in the newspaper, it's on our city website, et cetera. And then we hold a public hearing, and then the council has to take action within that time period. If the council can adopt that ordinance and then it becomes law, or the council can choose to not adopt it, or adopt a amended version of it. If the amended version is not satisfactory to the committee, then it can trigger the process to have to be put it on the ballot. If 4/5 of the committee, 4 of the 5 people on the committee are okay with the amended ordinance, then you don't have to have an election. Any questions?
Think about that 4/5 number.
Or just the committee.
Yeah.
The 5-person committee, right?
It's a 5-person committee. Did we do this? It wasn't exactly this version, but we were checking with them. I feel like we did a version of this when we were working on something previously. We checked with them to make sure that they were tracking. Remember which one that was?
It wasn't the one I was here for.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so do not express their objection.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
So
kind of
they're okay.
kind of an inverse.
Right. So what can happen sometimes is we identify a legal issue and we point it out to them. And it starts a conversation where they're like, oh, good point. Can we take care of that as opposed to like starting all over again? So sometimes everybody agrees that what we're proposing to do to tweak the language is still going to achieve what they want to achieve. It makes it better and more legal or more defensible or more understandable or what have you. So oftentimes, it's not attorneys drafting these and we know a little bit more about our code and, you know, the numbering or the labeling and whatnot. So we work to try and find something that everybody agrees is trying to achieve the same purpose in general.
And so in many ways, excuse me, Mr. Chair, so in many ways, that 4 of the 5 people or all 5 people are sort of speaking on behalf of the signatories in many ways.
Yeah, sort of, yeah. Mhm.
Because the signatories aren't.
Or the committee.
opinion on it.
Yeah. Any questions? Now the ballot, a lot of these ballots are largely the same. The ballot questions, as you may have noticed, we've had some ballot questions on our ballots recently here, and they have to be yes or no. City ballot questions have to be yes or no. And the majority has to vote yes. So we very carefully construct these questions so that the majority is the yes vote. You know what I mean? Like the way that, so that the goal of the purpose of the initiative or the purpose of the effort that we're hearing, we construct the sentence so that yes means approval, right? Yes means to put into action what they want to happen. And so we oftentimes will provide those explanatory sentences at the bottom to say a yes vote means, a no vote means. Here you have a question, Don.
Hey, John.
If a person voting does not vote either way, does it go as a no? Or is it just,
It's out of the number of people that vote. So if you chose not to vote, say 100 people were issued ballots, but only 50 of them voted on that, our total would be taken out of 50.
And just to note, that's different than a constitutional question at the state level. So we also can, just as a side note, the law authorizes local governments to spend money to educate voters on things like this. And so we always put the answer to that question on those FAQs for ballot questions. So when people come up and we have it on our website and as an explanation, so people can understand how the math is being calculated and we can build out those yes, no explanations a little bit more than we are able to do on the actual ballot, given the size limitations.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
A quick question. In terms of the structuring of the ballot so that a yes vote means approval or passing, is that universal among cities that do have initiative? Is it state law, or will you see some communities a no would mean, I can't imagine what it would be, but the whole idea that you're structuring it, as you said, around a yes vote being approval, is that it's always handled?
Sure, I don't know the answer to that question. I have not done that research. I think we talk about it here as being, as trying to be intentional about how we create the sentences and the questions, and you'll hear us talk about it at the council meetings, because they have to approve the ballot language and explain to them thought process on it. So I could report back at the next meeting.
Oh, it was more of a curiosity than anything, yeah.
I don't think that that's always the case with the constitutional questions. I'm not sure.
Yeah. When was the last time that an initiative passed in Bloomington?
Did you check that?
I did not check that.
It's been a while. Yeah.
I don't remember.
So the litigation, Chair, the litigation in, just a second.
Oh, yeah, you're good.
The litigation in Jennison, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2. I think it was maybe 1, which was the solid waste garbage litigation. One of the issues that was heavily briefed and argued before the courts was what were the petitioners trying to do? And there was an argument that there was one argument that they were trying to do initiative, and another argument they were trying to do referendum. And another argument, I believe, that they were trying to amend the charter. And so I think that at times people have tried to use some of these powers in different approaches to doing that. And one of the goals, I think, of this process is to increase understanding of what these things are and how and what they're for. But then also when we talk to, when I, for example, present to the Bloomington Leadership Program and programs like that, we always talk about this chapter and explain to them what's happening in this chapter. And we also, when we hear about an effort, sometimes we'll hear about an effort to try and use some of these powers. We'll reach out to them, especially if they have legal counsel, we'll reach out to their lawyer. And sometimes their lawyer will reach out to us and we can have a conversation about what are they trying to achieve? And then, offer feedback about whether something is, potentially not constitutional or what have you, because it takes a lot of time to collect all these signatures and a lot of effort and energy and money sometimes. And so we want to make sure that they understand what they're doing. And if a word needs to be 4 and they've got 5 and we know it needs to be different, we want to be able to tell them that so that they don't get frustrated. And we can make that simple edit early on, or at least make them aware of the suggestions so they can consider it before they go around and collect signatures.
Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I guess just a question kind of on like Mark's thing about like the yes versus no. I mean, I guess like what was the money resource of like the education that like say for ranked choice voting on the last one of like to educate that a yes vote actually meant to like repeal, the thing. So I mean, I guess like,
Right.
because I guess that's where like,
Oh, yeah.
of that yes versus no.
Right.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, there was, right. So chair and members, the educational efforts that I'm aware of that we've done is it's in the briefing, it's in the newspaper, and it's on the city website. And do you post it anywhere else?
It's on the sample ballot. One.
Sample ballot. Yep.
One other point to remember is when it gets to the actual voting, the election judges are not allowed to try to help them interpret in any way. And so we have to be very careful, navigating that. But we put it in the briefing. And given this was the second go around, our voters were familiar with it, so.
I got a question. Would it be useful, based on your comment, would it be useful to make them specify whether they're doing an initiative?
Well, chair members,
It seems like in the trash case, it wasn't obvious, wasn't manifestly obvious.
on the actual petition, it does say that. It says initiative, referendum, recall.
Yeah.
So I think that particular example of Jennison was complicated, so complicated twice. I mean, I will offer that. I'm always happy to have a conversation with.
I didn't notice that it was on the form, so it seems like implicitly that they're saying it's
Mhm.
an initiative or a referendum. Okay.
We're trying to be as intentional as possible. 5.9. Okay, 5.9. This section is pretty straightforward in saying that none of this stuff is saying you can't also amend the city charter. And amending the city charter has to be done in accordance with the Constitution and state law. So there was some question in some previous amendments that we suggested a tweak to make or challenge the constitutionality of them. Some of you that were on the Charter Commission might remember that. So this occasionally comes up. Next slide. All right, are we ready for referendum? So similar to what we've talked about before, 5 Bloomington registered voters can form a committee to repeal an ordinance that's on the books. And they have 15 days from the date that the ordinance takes effect to file it with the clerk. So at the end of almost every ordinance we have, you'll see at the end effective date, and there is language about when it becomes effective. Sometimes it's on publication, sometimes it's into the future, et cetera. So that's why we always make sure to say that. Chair, do you want to acknowledge our newest arrival?
Hey, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry for my tardiness.
For the record, Chair, the member McGovern arrived at 7:37.
Ron?
Why, isn't it possible after 15 days to pursue a referendum of the ordinance you don't think is?
Chair and members, I don't think that it's impossible. I just think you can't use this vehicle to do it. You would have to talk to your council member or otherwise reach out and express your unhappiness with it. I don't know exactly why the 15 days is in there, other than that. The only thing that comes to my mind, most people make decisions and impact decisions and spend money and, buy land and whatnot based on something being statically in the law. And so we need to provide them with certainty that certain things are going to stick. And so the time period is relevant for that reason.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I had the same kind of question. 15 days doesn't seem very long in many ways for like work.
We'll have to pay attention, I guess.
And I mean, is that something that's in the statute by chance, or is that something that is, that if there was agreement on the Charter Commission, that we would look at that number of days? Is it part of state statute?
Chair members, I don't think it's a statute because this is a unique to Bloomington law. If you're interested in, I didn't do an analysis of other cities like we did the analysis of percentages. You could certainly look and see what sort of percentages are in existence for other cities that have referendum powers. I just don't know that off the top of my head, but I could bring that back.
I think it'd be interesting to explore that at some level. I think that would be maybe too far out. There has to be a limitation of some kind, but I can not only see a situation where 15 days isn't really enough time for people to realize what might have happened and maybe, but more importantly, and I guess it would probably just fall into one of the, it'd probably fall into initiative, but let's say people begin to realize the implication of an ordinance, or maybe its full effect, and that takes some time, so. But I think, yeah, I would be in favor of exploring the number of days, learning more about that.
So chair members, I'll offer that, there is a public hearing, there's notice of a public hearing on the ordinance, then there is a public hearing, and then the ordinance doesn't take effect until typically publication, which is 10 days later. So it's more like 25 or more days after the public hearing that, so it says 15 days after it takes effect, but it doesn't take effect until 10 days.
Right, yeah.
But it is more than just 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or about a month.
Excuse me,
Right, yeah.
after 15 years, couldn't you initiate a petition to limit that?
Chair members, yeah, you probably could, with an initiative to do that. Yeah. Or to otherwise change it to be what you wanted. Yeah.
So there'd be avenues to be able to chair. There would be avenues to be able to navigate, like if you said you noticed 30 days, 45 days later.
Chair members, the other thing I'll offer is that this process here is one vehicle, but there's also parliamentary procedure process in our council. The council has rules. It has it created it for itself the right of reconsideration. So it can reconsider, it can, within certain time periods, it can also reconsider if there's an error. So if there was a factual error or a clerical error or something like that, it can reconsider on its own and issue on its own prerogative to do that. And it has done that on a couple of occasions that I can remember. It can reconsider on that same meeting, which is more typical parliamentary procedure, but we've actually changed it so it can reconsider at the subsequent meeting as well, the next immediate meeting. So we have some robust reconsideration rules on our parliament procedure for the council already. All right. So similar to what we discussed, the petition that's set up for the referendum. And as our city clerk crunched the numbers, and for this referendum, based on our last election, it would be 3,132 signatures of registered Bloomington voters.
Mr. Chair, would the session also be here to add in this petition as well? Probably the email.
Yep. Chair members, I wrote that down for each of the petitions. Yep. All right, any questions on this?
Chair, I was just curious, how do they, if you're going through this process, do they reach out to you to find out that figure?
Yes.
Okay, so they know going into it, like how many they're trying.
And chair members, I'll also offer, almost always that I've seen, they'll do the landscape of a 11 by 17 sheet of paper. That's the preferred signature collecting format, in my experience. All right, next slide. Sure.
Question is on like slide 10, talked about phone and email for like through the decision. Would it be helpful? It's like would that also be helpful to have their information?
Yeah, remember, that's what we were, yeah. That's what we were talking about, right? Yeah, the commission members.
Any petition?
Yeah, 12. All right. So now with regard to the filing, it's somewhat similar.
One thing, if you go back one, I think there's an interesting dynamic here is that the initiative threshold is 10%. And the referendum threshold is 15. And as you go through here, there's gonna be a couple places where where it's generally harder to have a referendum.
Yeah.
In many different ways than it is to do it. And the 15% is the first of more than one of those harder. It's like the 15 days thing that we talked about is a harder.
Mm-hmm. So chair members, for those of you that remember, or maybe you weren't here, I was asked to compile the other communities that have these rights. And so that's in your packet. And then in anticipation of the question, I crunched the numbers and came up with, I think it's mode, the most commonly occurring quantities, and crunch those numbers for you. So when we get to that point, I can tell you what those are. All right, so with the filing of the petition, the committee must file the signatures with the clerk within 15 days of its initial request. So it's got 15 days to collect signatures. They file all those signature pages at the same time. And then again, the clerk has those 10 days to determine sufficiency. If it's insufficient, then the committee has another 15 days to get it sufficient and correct the deficiencies. And if it's still insufficient after 15 days, the clerk notifies each committee member. All right, if it's sufficient or complete, then the ordinance that it's seeking to repeal is suspended. And the council must reconsider it at its next regular meeting after it provides notice. Remember, it's going to have published notice. So it's going to publish notice and then it's going to reconsider this suspended ordinance. The council has two choices. It can repeal it or it can reaffirm it. If it reaffirms, then it must order an election on the ordinance, and the ordinance stays suspended until after the election results are official. If a majority of the people vote against the ordinance, then that ordinance will not be effective. Or in the alternative, if the majority vote for keeping the ordinance on the books, then the ordinance will be effective after the election has been canvassed. Any questions?
Observation and a question. So the observation is that this, it seems to design to be that people got to be pretty worked up to make this process work. It's not just like an ordinary thing. People got to be pretty worked up. The other question I had is on a referendum petition. What would you say that voting yes means on the referendum petition? What is the yes on that? Is I repeal it or yes, I keep it?
So, chair members, I would go back to what we typically use is how they have been circulating their petition. Like, what are they trying to do? You'll see on the petition, it says the purpose of what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And use that as a guide for what is a yes? What is the goal of the yes? And try to stay as intuitive as possible for the people that are, because when the voter goes to vote, we want it to be like a natural brain connection from the question to the yes to the no, and not have to do mental gymnastics. So we try to avoid double negatives. We try to avoid negative words that are, especially negative words that are modified with a no or a never or not in front of them. And then we also run these ballot questions through software that gives them a grade level. And we try to keep that grade level at 12, grade level 12. Sometimes we've had to go higher because the question is complicated, but we try to go with 12 or lower. All of this is in the way of trying to make the question understandable to every voter.
Because the reason I was asking, it says if a majority of registered voters vote against the ordinance.
Yeah, I know.
And I guess the question there is there a language change there that would help align this with what you're trying to achieve?
So
I don't know if there is, but
Chair members, I don't necessarily disagree that I shouldn't say disagree. I think that's worthy of discussion, because if you go to the next slide, it says that ballots have to conform to the rules in 5.8, and 5.8 of the charter is the one we've already talked about that says the majority vote, if the majority votes yes, then it happens. So you've got a potential for confusion here with the majority voting against, then it will not be effective. And so it might be more complicated to explain to a voter. Again, we would certainly use those, a yes means, like a yes means you don't want this to happen, or a no means you want this to happen. If there's some like dueling intuition there, but it's worthy of more conversation, and you all have the language. I'm certainly welcome to take a run at it if you like me to, but I'm also open to any suggestions that the commission might have. Yeah. I know why we did the next, if you go to the next section. I know why we did this in 21. I remember why we did it, because we were, again, this was a part of the consistency discussion and trying to create as much consistency as possible. But I too had the same thought, Chair, when I was preparing for this, and thought, I wonder if that would, having, 4 years of experience on ballot questions, since then, we've had some. I wonder if this is maybe some space for improving the clarity on that. So I'll defer to you all if you want.
I think that generally we've been in favor of clarity, so I think, speaking back to what same intent, clear, worthwhile. I think that section there, basically 5 parts of it are just about initiative ballots, and parts of it are about initiative ballots and referendum ballots, and kind of maybe trying to tease that apart a little bit and have it. I was looking ahead to see, okay, for the recall, does the recall get tangled up in this? And it doesn't necessarily seem like it does, but trying to clarify that this language applies to both initiative and referendum. This applies to initiative. This applies to but our hypothetical 12th grade reader can
right?
Ron?
Against that idea.
Uh-huh.
It occurs to me that by definition, referendum requires a yes to get rid of whatever there were.
By its very nature, it's trying to do something negative, trying to take something away. So, yeah.
But the proponents of it
I want to repeal.
will say, I want to vote yes. Get rid of it.
Right.
It's a referendum.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
undoing.
Right,
something.
which is probably why it's written the way it is. If a majority vote against, if a majority of the voters vote against it, then it's not, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
If you showed up at a meeting and they said, are you are you in favor, basically, are you in favor of keeping this ordinance? I think to your point is what the question is really. Are you in favor of keeping it? Or not?
Well,
Or are you saying that are you in favor of getting rid of it? Are you saying, are you in favor of getting rid of it?
Right,
that's right.
yeah, that's where it starts.
Right.
Referendum.
Because if you're-
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so chair members, we've had very similar conversations in the legal department trying to honor all of the goals in competing goals here of clarity and grade level and so we often will end up with these if-then statements at the bottom, like if you vote yes, then you want, and if you vote no, just to make it as, because those sentences tend to score very low grade level. They're just very clear.
That was in fact the position with the last go around for ranked choice voting.
Mhm.
If you voted yes, you wanted to get rid of it.
Right, right. Because the people that were initiating the effort were trying to take, trying
Yeah.
to appeal it.
Yeah.
That's a great example.
That is the suggestion for 514, then to previous paragraph, kind of like the.
Yeah, I think, okay. Well, I'm gonna ask a question, just to give guidance. So, do we want as a group to say that we want in the referendum that we want yes to be in the referendum, mean to get rid of it? Undo what the council did. That's, I think, basically what you're proposing.
Yes.
That we do that. Are people okay with that and saying that that's kind of our guiding principle on that? Not seeing anybody object to that. So let's say we're going to continue with, continue with yes, meaning that it does what the committee is asking effectively.
That's kind of the way yes means what the committee is asking. Yeah.
I think the idea of like rationalizing parts of 513 and 508 and teasing that apart, I think that still makes sense to make it be clear. But I think I want to be very specific about that.
Okay. Ready?
Clarify, we're
Yeah.
creating a new then separate paragraph on 514.
I think we're letting the staff.
Okay.
Kind of tease that apart to make it.
Mhm.
One noted on 520, all ballot. 514 says referendum ballots, and then 508 says initiative ballots. It'd be possible to change the title to just be form of for each of those, since they both address the form of the ballot itself, rather than doing those three different titles.
Yeah. I'll check that. Really check it.
On that before we move on to the recall.
Recall. So as a reminder, recall is to remove an elected official. So again, a 5-member committee has to be formed. And the official who's trying to recall, their term must expire more than 300 days from when the petition is filed. The committee files with the clerk. They have to give their name, the name of the elected official they're seeking to recall, the grounds for which they want to recall the official, their intent, and then the names and addresses of committee members. So my suspicion is that you all would like me to add email and telephone or something like that. Which I'll do. And then the clerk has 5 business days to determine compliance with the requirements. If yes, then they can, the certification moves forward and is provided to the committee. If no, then the clerk notifies the committee. They need that certificate for the subsequent stages where they have to attach it to each signature page that they're circulating. All right, so it's pretty similar to before, but not quite the same. It's not a petition, it's a certificate. Yeah.
It doesn't appear that
Yes.
there's any standard or guidelines for grounds. So grounds could really be anything that the committee deems as grounds,
Correct. Less than
however reasonable or
2
unreasonable.
words or less.
So then the question is there any reason to have grounds? Make them specify it, not just like,
Here, I would say yes, because when on a subsequent slide, you'll see the
okay,
opportunity to respond.
all right.
I think that's interesting to note here, and I don't know if I care about it, I just want to point it out, is that in the other 2, it goes to you. For this one, it goes to you. Is that difference meaningful?
Is that, Mr. Chair, is that normal in other charters too? That this one goes to the city clerk versus?
Chair members, I don't know the answer to that. I will say it didn't spark as being unusual to me. And I only need to approve the language of the ordinance, not the referendum.
Yeah, I think from working in city government, it didn't strike me as odd, just because I assumed being like the charter attorney, something that has to do with that, where like the city clerk oversees elections, which this would directly.
Yeah, and what would happen if they gave it to me? It's the first thing I would do is call the city clerk. Just left.
Like, I don't want to get involved with this stuff yet.
Really, that would be the first thing I would do, so. Yeah. All right, so again, here is the count. They include the certificate with the petition that they fill out similar to the other ones. And for a citywide official, so the mayor or 2 citywide council members, you would need 5,220 signatures if you did it tomorrow. And then you see the various districts for our 4 district-specific council members.
So again, for citywide, it's a pretty high bar.
Well, we have 90,000 voters, so
Yeah, but it's
our 90.
a lot of signatures to collect.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you pointed out, they'd have to be taken out.
Yeah. Right. So within 30 days of the clerk getting the certificate, the committee must file its completed petition. And then the clerk has 10 days to determine the sufficiency of their petition. And then they have 10 more calendar days to collect more signatures if they need to. But they can't change their statement of, their grounds. And if they can't get the number of sufficient signatures, then it's done within that time period. If they do, next slide, if they do get all their signatures, the clerk alerts council and at the next regular meeting, they transmit that to the council. The clerk transmits it to the council. And then the council must provide for a special recall election. They must, by resolution, they have to take that action. And then that recalled official has 10 days to provide the clerk with a statement that answers those grounds, responds to those grounds that were put forward by the committee of petitioners. All right.
More than 500 words.
They get twice as many words to say why they should stay.
And then what happens to that?
All right, next slide.
Okay.
It's like
Yeah, keep jumping ahead.
Page.
All right, so the clerk publishes notice of the election and in that notice includes the petitioner statement, why they want the recall, and then the officials answer, rebuttal, response. And then the candidate must file the candidates who want the job, who want the seat, have to file in accordance with the typical filing rules with the clerk, as if it was a regular election ballot. I know that I'm kind of bumping through these, but if you have a question, interrupt. But this next one is where the meat of it is. So, ballot. If the council person, member of the council resigns 10 days after they receive the petition, there's one process. If they resign within those 10 days, let me back up and say, if they resign within those 10 days, it just proceeds as much as possible like a typical special election to fill the seat. And the clerk will do her best to pull that off and do it as much as possible like a typical special election. If they resign after, then it's a little more complicated because you're already proceeding forward. You've got the requirement again of the yes, no on there. You've got the names of the candidates, you got the names, restrict what I said about the resigning after. You've got the names of the candidates who want to fill the vacancy as well as the ballot question about the recall. So if that candidate is recalled by function of this ballot, or excuse me, if that official is recalled, poor job on this one, sorry. If that elected official is recalled as a function of the voting on this ballot, then the subsequent candidates that had filed for replacing the recalled official, the clerk uses ranked choice voting to elect that candidate for the remainder of the term that's available. Do you want me to take another run at that, or do people get that?
Chair, I feel like this one could use a little.
Absolutely, that's good.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't do a very good job.
No, I don't think that that's on you. I think it's worded in a way that's very like confusing unless the officer whose removal is sought resigns. Like my brain,
Yeah.
I got lost there.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually you'll figure it out if you read it a few times, but like this feels important and maybe there's an opportunity to make the language a little more
Yeah.
user-friendly.
Right. I don't disagree because I had to read it like 13 times. Chair, so if I think what this is trying to say is if they resign within 10 days, you're not going to have to do all this recall shuffling on the ballot, right? You're just going to run like a regular election. But if they don't resign within those 10 days, then you're going to have sort of a two-stepper on that ballot. You're going to have to vote on whether they should be recalled. And then you're also got the ranked choice on the replacements. So they're going to have, they're probably going to have some hand counting.
Mr. Chair, if they choose not to resign, why does the recall election need to be tied to the board replacement candidate? Couldn't it just be treated just as if the person they chose not to resign, there's a recall election, they lost a recall election, so to speak, and now there'll be a special election?
I can think of two reasons.
What's that?
I can think of two reasons. Okay. Number one is, it doesn't leave you with a long period of time where there's no particular part of town, that's number one. Number two is if you were gonna have a special election to select someone, you have to pay for two elections.
Yeah.
You know, and it gets tangled up because and then you have to remember that for council positions, they don't, if somebody resigns, there's a whole separate process around that.
Yeah.
That involves there's an appointment. This doesn't allow for appointment in that, this path doesn't allow for appointment.
Right. So if somebody,
Yeah.
remembers, if somebody passes away or they have to move out of the district, the council, and you, so the first thing, when I find out that, something like that, the first thing I do is look at the statute, there's a state law, and you do the math on how much time is left on their term.
Yeah,
Whether you have to have an election or whether you can appoint. And if you can appoint, then you march through that process. And if you have to have an election, then I call the clerk, right?
so like looking at it from the standpoint of the petitioners, if you threw in like the council could appoint someone, that would probably anger people because the council may not appoint the kind of person that they had hoped to replace this person with. I'm kind of all over, but I'm kind of saying where that comes from. I still think it's kind of unfortunately complicated.
If he didn't resign. Because if he resigns, the statutes that run elections would.
Right.
And I
Make them resign. No.
too, that a few years back, they passed legislation that established basically, I believe, 6 uniform local election dates. So if you were going to have a special election, the law designates which of the particular dates you can have.
Okay.
So if you did separate them into 2, you'd have that one, and then you'd have to wait another 2. And the cost of running an election is about $85,000
Yeah.
per.
So I can certainly see. I think that in terms of your first point, Steve, in terms of, there's a period of time where there is not representation. Well, that can happen in other situations, and that's unfortunate. But the reality, if the people choose to recall that person, cost is always a tough one. You kind of hate to have to think about that, but the reality is that's a lot of money so I don't know where I come up. Thank you. So that makes sense.
Out of curiosity, is there a sample ballot or a previous ballot that may have ever been used for a recall election? I'm just curious just to see what that looks like.
That one.
So we do have every ballot ever. I believe for the most part, I could look and find it.
I'm just out of curiosity, yeah.
If we had one. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Not aware of us ever having.
Yeah.
Has there been one
Going back to the 70s, I don't.
going back to
Very
Particularly not one
curious
with ranked choice voting on
how this actually looks.
rare occurrence,
Yeah.
I'm not thinking.
right?
Chair and members, I'm trying to remember another city that had a recall of
Sure there has.
I'm sure there has been,
No,
yeah.
that's-
I could do a little research and circulate it for sure.
Not too much.
Okay, are we ready to move on? All right, that's it. So I've been keeping notes. I have 1, 2, 4, 5 things to follow up on. And that leads into the last chapter, or next slide, leads into the next steps here. We have our annual meeting on May 1st. And we do have a couple of topics that are 4 or 5 sections of the charter that have come up through staff or from you all that you'd like to be adjusted. And so I plan to bring those in May if you want me to. And then I could bring these other ones as well for your consideration. The next agenda item unpacks those a bit more. And it's pretty short, but I'd be happy to provide more details on what ideas are, or I can just orally talk. But in order for you all to take action on specifics, we have to start a process and make some decisions. Or we can do the annual meeting and then make decisions at that point. So Chair, I think that that would be a good good conversation for the next agenda item. If you want to move to the next agenda item.
Sure. I agree with that. So one question I had, kind of going back to 5.20. Is there any interest in people wanting to talk about adding the appointment path on this, or do people want to just stick with the? I just wanted to put that out there. And don't take that as me pitching you on the idea, hey, we got to think about it. I just want to make sure we make an intentional decision on that. Anybody strongly feel that they want to change it?
I think it would be fun to have a break off. Try and figure out what's gonna happen.
I didn't.
Ron, go find 4 people.
That's a really interesting question.
And recommend going to district because it only requires 500 signatures. That's if you want to try it out, that's how you go.
No, I want to observe.
No.
It doesn't seem like there's.
Okay.
Okay.
I did want to report the findings of my collation. So you've got the analytics on each charter city. So the percentages was something that we had talked about as being something you all were interested in. So in initiative, the thresholds, the voting thresholds, past election. The most common ones are 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25%. And Bloomington has 10%. And the most popular, most commonly occurring is 10%. Of the cities that have this power, 25 cities have the 10% requirement. The second most is that 19 cities require 20%. So the majority of the cities require more than us, more than Bloomington. But we require the same as a lot, most commonly occurring percentage. And move on to the next one?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like for trivia when you.
I know, right? Referendum, we require 15%, which 31 other charter cities or 30 other charter cities require the same amount. The second most common percentage is 17 cities, both 17 and 17 require 10 and 20%. So we're right in the middle. And the most commonly occurring percentage is what we have in Bloomington.
I have a question. It's more a question for the group here. Back quite a while ago, we used to charge the princely sum of $2 to file for city council. Okay, that was the filing fee for city council, and we got people who filed for city council and never ran campaigns, and they triggered primaries back when we had primaries, and the charter commission got tired of that, and for the folks who've been around for a while, and I don't know if you remember if you were here when we talked, but we bumped it to $50, $2.
Right, I do remember.
Yeah. And the concept was that no one who was running a real campaign would find $50 to be a problem for doing it, but it kept people from just impulsively going down and filing and blowing $85,000 on a primary election.
Oh,
I think that the question that I have listening to what you kind of talked through here is I would be interested in a little bit of history on initiatives and what initiatives have been successful in Bloomington and whether, because and to let us think a little bit more about whether our threshold for the number of signatures is maybe a little bit too low. If we're seeing a lot of initiatives that are being created but not getting brought through, not being voted on by I think our goal is to have that number be low enough that if the voters really feel like they want to change something, they have the ability to do it. We don't make it unnecessarily hard, but we don't want it to be so low that it's,
Yeah.
that you don't have to go build consensus around the idea.
And it's more disruptive, I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
You know, and my goal is never to like try and cut people off from doing things, but if we come back and say, you know, in the past 30 years, we've had 7 initiatives and none of them have passed with this threshold, that I'd at least like to have a conversation about whether that signature number is too low.
I would suggest we consider it as to whether or not the signature percentage is correct, not too low or too high.
Oh, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Just
Yeah.
because there is an awful lot of work involved with just the process of gathering signatures, so.
There sure is.
One point I might make is it worthy of discussion as to why there's a different threshold for initiative versus referendum?
Yeah.
You know, what's the reason for that?
I actually have an opinion on that second question that you asked, and the reason is that the referendum, that they have the power to stop an ordinance from going into effect. And I think, in my mind, I want people to be pretty riled up to stop something like that, because they basically can go collect signatures and stop an ordinance from going into effect. I think there's other things like recalling people or the next election where you can fix things that are a little bit longer term. So I'm personally, I'm okay with it being much harder and I think it's much harder to have a referendum than it is to have an initiative. And I think that's on purpose. And personally, I like that.
I think it's worthy of discussion. I don't have an opinion on either way. But,
Yeah. Oh, now is the
You know.
time to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, it's early to, yeah.
Of a recall, we require 25%, which is the most common percent required. 23 other charter cities require 25%. The next highest is 20%, and that's 10 charter cities. I think the one that were potentially different, I mean, we're the most commonly occurring percentage, but more cities require more would be initiative. So 25 cities are at 10%, 15 cities are at 15, and 19 cities are at 20, and 2 cities are at 25%. So we're definitely on the lower end, although it is a very frequently selected percentage among charters.
Yeah. And is it true that for the vast majority, it's relatively equal for both on percentages? So, you know, initiatives and referendums, there are large enough disparity between cities where they, for example, favor a higher percent referendums as opposed to initiatives.
Chair members, I did not do that number crunching, but you do have them here for you. And I see a lot that are the same, and I see a couple that are different. Some cities are just have a completely different approach, like 50 and 100, you know, in Laverne.
Talk about barriers.
And
Wow.
All 7 people in the burn have to.
one city had like 3 people needed to do it. 500 people in Laverne, like specific numbers, I guess.
Are we the largest of the charter cities, or like where do we fall?
We are not, chair members, we are not the largest of the charter cities because Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rochester, and Duluth, and St. Cloud are charter cities. So we are not the largest charter city. Those are all technically larger.
What's the population of St. Cloud now?
Well, I guess population.
Population of St. Cloud is less than Bloomington, I believe.
Okay.
It's that whole tri-city.
Yeah, you
Tri-city, yeah.
How many charter cities are there?
For some reason, I have 103 in my head.
That's good.
Okay.
Rest are statutory. So
It's just statutory, yeah. I have it in another presentation. I just can't remember.
you told us. this, too.
Yeah, 2 months ago.
But I guess so, Mr. Chair, I guess really it would be in line, like the Rochester, Duluth, that St. Cloud area, which they're probably of similar ish size to us, like, are that, are.
Rochester does not have initiative and referendum. Rochester is the most similar to us in size. And it does not appear it has recall either. St. Cloud.
St. Cloud is 5% for both.
Petition.
Anything else on this topic here?
All right.
Hearing nothing, we'll go on to agenda item number 2.3. So that's possible.
That's why you. I will go and grab the other presentation. This is the one you have on your microscopic slide sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no wonder, yeah. Good to see it.
I didn't,
Yeah.
I thought this conversation would be at a pretty high level and we could talk through it this way, so that's why I didn't.
Say handout.
No, it's not in your handouts.
Oh.
It's on the back page.
It's on the back.
Yeah.
Over that one. Anybody else need one?
I would give you the slides just in case you wanted, if you wanted to take notes on the particular slides.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
captivated by the fact I keep them all on one sheet and I just went for it. All right, so, okay, so
Yeah.
for the record here, we're on to item 2.2, which is discussing the potential amendments for the charter. So for some of you that haven't been on the Charter Commission for very long, there's essentially 4 vehicles to amend the charter. It's in state law. You as the Charter Commission can propose you can do it by proposal or by ordinance. And I think that I have the actual statute in the packet for you if you want to read it. I think that the easiest way to sort of think about it at a high level is that it's a conversation, sort of a tennis match between the Charter Commission and the City Council. And if you both agree, it's a short match. And if you disagree, then it goes back and forth a couple of times. And so that's a common way that we have amended the charter. The other way that the charter can be amended is by a unanimous vote of the City Council. And by unanimous, I mean every single member has to be there and has to vote in favor of amending the charter. That's the other vehicle. Then you can have, elections and, all of the other methods, petitions and whatnot, but it either flows to the Charter Commission or flows to the City Council eventually. All right. This is at a super high level. There's 2.5 pages of text on it. All right. So these are the ones that have come up through the staff and the city staff and the Charter Commission from our last conversation. At a very high level, I'll just run through them. The readability came from the Charter Commission discussion at the last meeting. 6.06 and 6.07 we discussed at the last meeting, and there have a lot of similarities. And so there was a request to deduplicate them, I should say, and simplify them. So I took a run at it a couple times, and you'll see that language. The second one is a modernization of some language. There's a shift in the public administration world to using the word deputy instead of assistant. And so we have a mention of that in 3 places in our charter, lots of other places in our roles, but at three places in our charter. And so I'll highlight that. That is more, nothing more than that. And then I put an asterisk by 6 and 7 because my readability assignment in the delegation ID I'm going to tell you about in just a little bit addresses this already. So it's really just a change in 6.03. The delegation is something, it's an efficiency effort, which I'm interested in your feedback on, related to our systems that we have in place and the use of outside counsel. Into that. All right. So here is the text of 6.06 and 6.07. Long, and there is a fair amount of repetition between them. And we've done a little bit of tweaking of them back in 21 and 17 to address some delegation and a little bit of cleanup. But beyond that, there hasn't been really much work on these 2 sections. So I put together a draft of 6.06 and 6.07 on the subsequent slide. I can circulate this PowerPoint for you so you can look at it more closely. But it's what's happening in both of them is 2 separate things. One is this delegation. So essentially what's happening in these statutes or in these sections is, as a refresher from our last conversation, is it's discussing what has to happen, who has the power, and when do contracts have to go to the city council versus being administratively approved by staff. So it defaults as a form of structure in drawing lines to the uniform contracting law, which is in state law, which says draws a line at 175,000. Those contracts all have to go to the city council for approval. And then there's a delegation that flows below that for lower dollar amounts. And within that delegation is several documents that the council adopts related to the implementation of our financial management policies. So the council signs on to the delegations, and they're also very specifically in our financial management policies. It's a chart. And so you'll see here, because titles change over time, and what we're running into is that we've already had to address it once. I don't know why that's dinging, but I'm just going to keep talking. We've already had to address it once in our employment or in our financial management policies to unpack what a department head meant. And we're running into it again with assistant city manager. And so I'm suggesting more durable language, which is certain city staff. And then the council would take action when it adopts its financial management policies to effectuate who those certain staff people are. Okay, and then the same thing in a different version of the challenge down here. We have a delegation in our office that you all authorized back, I think in 21, that allowed someone else in the city attorney's office to sign pursuant to a council-approved, city manager-approved delegation. And that delegation currently says, if I'm out of the office, me, Melissa, the city attorney, I'm out of the office for 3 or more consecutive days, I have to designate someone to sign for me. And I do that every time I go on vacation and it's more than 3 days. I send a message to the city manager consistent with the requirements, when I'm coming back, how I'm accessible, et cetera, et cetera. And then it also addresses if I am unexpectedly gone in scenarios like that. Otherwise, previously, the contracts just sat there till the city attorney got back because there was no delegation authority. What we're encountering on a pretty regular basis now is that we work with outside counsel, and I have to sign the document and they have to sign the document. And while it does perform a function in me reviewing it, it is slowing things down sometimes because they have the same client. We have the same client. And so I'm interested in your feedback, and maybe the term is not under contract, but that's the most simplistic language. But we are in a contractual relationship with them. We are their client. The city is their client. And they have the same duty to the client that I do for the most part. So I'm interested in your feedback on that.
So you're saying the city of Bloomington is the client?
Yeah, we have the same client. Yeah.
So if I think about this and I think about my time on the HRA and we had legal counsel for the HRA.
Exactly.
That would allow, in some circumstances, the delegated HRA attorney to
Yep, correct.
have the authority to sign. Okay.
Well, and to play that out further, chair and members, in some instances, we have special counsel assigned to the city. We're hired by the city, and they are working on, under contract for the HRA, the city, the port, and the city on a project. And so what's happening is they have to sign for those entities, and then I have to sign for the city, even though they're the attorney working on the deal and we're paying them to work on the deal. So I'm not suggesting it's a burden for me to do it because I'm in a lot of those conversations, but it's slowing things down when we're otherwise paying them to do the job.
And I'm guessing the reason we're contracting with these various attorneys is they are specialists in that area that have expertise that goes probably beyond the expertise of what we have on staff. Therefore, we have them. So
Remember, that's accurate. Yep. So you'll see a similar approach taken here, delegate to certain staff, and then licensed attorneys under contract.
Would it, not a curiosity, would it be easier to just say, for example, approved by the city attorney or a licensed attorney designated or retained by the city, for example, and designated by the city attorney? So somebody retained by the city to represent them and then is designated as the signer by you.
Or even a licensed attorney as permitted and approved by the city manager. We could just cover it in the delegation.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that would work too.
Yeah. Chair and members, certainly looking for direction on this if you're interested in me pursuing it. The concern, I will remind the group, for those that were not here the last time we made this edit, was that there was a strong preference to have somebody in the city attorney's office signing. So if it wasn't me, they wanted the delegation to be somebody in our city attorney's office. So I want to just, because I want to be as transparent as possible, this would be a change.
what, if any, are the downsides to that as you thought through this? Downsides, dangers, potential for.
Chair members, I have the duty to the client regardless of whether I'm signing the document or not. I'm involved in the conversations. I guess it's potentially possible that I might not know everything that's in the document. Typically, though, I will say that when we're working with outside counsel, those are huge contracts, dollar value, and they're going to the city council. So the likelihood of me not knowing about them or the council not knowing about them is mitigated by that. But those would be the things that I would. Or, for example, they may not be as familiar with our requirements as I am. And so they might not know of something that I know about. Every now and then we'll work with outside counsel that doesn't know that we have, ironically, this signature requirement. And so I'll have to say to them, you need to add my signature onto this document. And then I point them to the charter, and that's the most common thing I point out to outside counsel. Sure.
Go ahead, John.
When you say delays, we talking days, weeks, months? Typically?
Days, chair, remember days. But on these documents, you're oftentimes collecting 9 or so signatures, so it's a lot. And that's just on our side. That doesn't include the other side. So if it's the port, the HRA in the city, which often it is, not always, but often on big deals, that's 9 signatures there. And then it's the other side, who usually has 1 or 3.
Sometimes these things are pretty time sensitive. as
I remember,
there's
they are.
financing attached by a certain, whatever it might be. I mean, sometimes days can be,
I would say the, chair members, the other thing though that it does create is that I don't feel comfortable signing something unless I know unless I know what's going on and what's happening in the document, because the requirement says that I've reviewed and approved it. So sometimes it's more than days if I have other things going on. And so I have to have reviewed it and I have to have approved it. So if it's a really big deal, it can take a lot of time for me to, and it may not take it may be a couple days delay at the back end of signing, but it's all of the meetings in the middle that I need to attend so that I can know what's going on when it gets to the point where me signing. So we have multiple attorneys in these meetings.
So kind of my reaction to this is I think this section here around kind of what I call like the review responsibility. I'm fairly comfortable with that being delegated. I think the execution of instruments one, I have to think more about around that, which is the one on the previous slide. Because I think that, I think you make on the 6.07 language, I think you make valid points that sometimes we have an expert who's better equipped to do that review than you are, and saying that we're going to make you do every review and it to somebody else seems kind of redundant. Particularly since you can control who does the review. So, it just gives you the flexibility to delegate that to somebody from outside if they have that particular expertise. On the execution of instruments, I'm thinking a little bit more about that one. I need to think a little bit more about that. So, Jeannie.
From experience, is there a way of working out a tier where at a certain amount you pay or you sign documents and then it tiers down to a contract that doesn't have a lot of face value? That way it kind of takes pressure off of you and you can delegate it to certain people that you see fit that would work well with that contract.
Chair members, we talked about that internally right now as an option as well as an approach. And because I'm signing contracts from the entire city, I see commonalities that individual attorneys working just with that department don't always know are happening. So there are probably 2 handfuls of times during a year where I'll realize that we're contracting with this entity in this department and this entity in this department and the same entity in another department. And I'm like, do we know that we're all hiring tree cutting companies? Like, so things like that happen with some frequency, or we'll notice that, and maybe AI could solve this in a couple of years perhaps, but for right now, I will notice those things or else that we have this one performance contract where we were signing it with the same person lots of times. And because I was signing all of them, I asked the person sending them to me, who is this person? And could we just enter into one contract with this person to do all of these things as opposed to 15 contracts during the year? And not to say that I'm like some brilliant problem solver, but because I was seeing every one of those contracts, there was some value to that. So I'm a little bit reluctant to do that because we'll lose that uniformity. And the actual act of clicking the DocuSign button does not take very much time at all. So, and then I also know then what's going on, and I ask questions like, I'll sometimes see and I'll ask a question, why did you take this particular approach? And I frankly find a lot of benefit in seeing all the contracts and knowing what's going on. So, so at this point, we're not recommending that delegation approach. Maybe in future, but not quite yet.
So another piece of feedback I have on this is the second sentence here where it talks about contracts that do not require council approval. if we're in kind of the mode of simplifying, is to basically, yeah, I'm talking about six.
Yep.
months here. Yep.
Yeah, it refers to under.
Yeah. Is to say that contracts that don't require, that basically telling the city council, you make the policy for contracts that don't require council approval and don't specify the city manager, and that just completely delegate the responsibility for that policy to the council, because they will end up putting the city manager in there
Mhm.
in that, but I don't, for those here, I don't know that, you know, if the city council has the authority to do that, you know, they can, it makes it simpler to read if you take the
Mhm.
city
Yeah.
manager and just say,
Mhm.
they set a policy for those.
Yeah, yeah, because that's what they're,
Yeah,
that's
effectively, that's,
anyway.
yeah.
Mhm.
Because I know even just like from the staff perspective, who executed contracts that were around $110,000. It was much simpler, because again, you budget for it, you have all that stuff goes to the finance and all that, the council approves that budget. And it kind of comes through, so like even if it's $105,000 of something,
Mhm.
having, you know, at the time it was Jamie, but like, you know, the city manager,
Right,
you know, to be able to review, you know, and just have like this simple review, so it just has to go through, because again, you do the steps to figure out, you know, where that money should be going, because it was like very laid out in the budget that this sort of contract is for like officials. For sports.
Mhm. All right.
Yes.
Okay, so this one's really straightforward. It's just, this is our merit system, which we've talked about at our last periodic charter review. And this just needs a term change here. All righty.
Mhm.
And then I thought there was one more. Oh, nope. And then anything else you guys are interested in? I got a list, so that might be the anything else, but is there anything, how would you like me to bring these to you for the May 1st meeting?
You have to.
Would you like me to put all of them, for example, in resolution form for you to take action on? And then they would go to council? Or would you like me to bring you drafts and you would approve the drafts and then we'd have a special meeting thereafter where we put that all into motion? Or we decide, I could put them all into drafts and you all could make decisions about whether you want to start them or whether you want me to suggest, for example, this merit board one. This one could probably go to the council.
Yeah.
You know, 7 votes. That could be a
Yeah,
possibility.
so let me ask that question. Everybody okay with this comment?
That's housekeeping.
That one there.
Yeah, that's.
There's your answer on that one.
Okay, these, for example, I could prepare a draft and then we could decide how to proceed with them, or I could put it into resolution form and we could drop the hammer and move it forward. We can take a 2-step approach. My gut, if you're looking for a reaction, is we need a 2-step approach. There's a lot of discussion and questions, and we're already going to be having a lot of discussion and questions about these other ones. And so they're already going to necessitate a 2-step approach, so it might be easier to package this.
Yeah, I think that.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Going to meet at least twice more this year, if everyone's okay with that. And then the other thing that I would suggest would be helpful is for me to work with the city clerk and get some election dates and some things kind of backed up. So we have a bit of a calendar in the event any of these end up taking that direction. Because there are some requirements of, I think, 70 days and 65 days and things like that. Just so that we don't back ourselves into a situation where we have to potentially trigger a special election requirement, which I don't think you probably want to do accidentally, right? I mean, in purpose maybe, but not accidentally. So we can work out those timing. We have the council calendar, so we could map out a couple of those scenarios for your consideration. And that'll help inform the dates when we meet to continue moving this forward. That generally makes sense?
Can you go back to the merit one for a second? Given that everything else is going to be a two-step process, are you still thinking this one would be, you would come with a resolution? Or are you going to do them all at the same time?
Chair members, I want to look and see how we've done it in the past, because I want to say that when we've asked the council to consider an ordinance on something, it's come from the Charter Commission to say, we've looked at this issue and we recommend that you take action by ordinance, unanimous adoption of this ordinance to amend the charter. I want to say that that's how we did it in the past.
Well-
That sounds familiar.
My question on this one was, this one that's highlighted, the assistant city manager, is that the one where you want to change it to deputy?
Deputy.
And then part of me is like, well, what happens when deputy is out of favor? And
Right.
is there a way to more generically, and you probably tried to think through that already.
Typically, I would say, chair members, I would say yes, except for what's happening here. What's happening in this section and in this subdivision in particular is that these specific titles are being pulled out of the classified service. Right, so specificity is very important here.
Yeah.
So those are the only titles that are not a part of the merit system.
Got it.
That matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that could happen is that when the title is changed in the rest of the documents, because it's in employment rules and all the rest, we could package this change to happen at that same time. That would be another option. You all could say, when you take action to do all this or cleanup, related cleanup, we recommend that you also amend the charter to coincide with all of that.
So is the council working on that to like change like Kathy's?
So chair members, there are council discussions ongoing, somewhat related to that topic. But also there's a compensation plan that's coming out and some other related employment updates. Because we do annual reviews of the documents. And this has been something that's been on the list for a while to have updated. And so here's our sort of typical time.
So just to kind of frame it up, because I'm sympathetic to what Mark is suggesting about trying to bundle it together, but it seems like there's a little bit of utility in trying to get this done. Whereas the other ones, there's not quite the pressure to immediately kind of make a change to that. And the cost difference here really is the cost of running an ordinance through the process, which is primarily going to be your notice costs, right? Putting in the paper.
Right.
Yeah.
Notice, I think it's $90 twice typically.
Oh, so it's not that much money. So I guess based on that, I'd say that what we ought to try to do is to try to send this one through because it's not like we're going to debate the language in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Go send that to the city council and then on the other ones, try to wordsmith that more and a package of that.
So question, Chair and members. So on 6.07 and 6.06, you've also got a reference to the assistant city manager in the current language there.
Yeah.
So I could change that as well. And so that they're all at least consistent so that we don't have an internal inconsistency.
Yeah.
And because they've all got sort of a version of the same problem.
The
It's down there. There it is.
Is the 606 and 607 language right now, is that causing any practical difficulties?
Chair members, no.
Okay.
Nope, because we have charts that
Okay.
unpack it.
So since it doesn't have, my opinion is, and whatever folks, the consensus of the group is, but my opinion is on the merit system one, there's a practical reason for wanting to do that right now and get that done. For the 6.07 and 6.06, we would like to do that. It's not, the language that's in there right now is not causing a practical difficulty today. And so spending the extra month or two to get language whipped into shape and doing that, that's not material in the big picture of things. Does that seem reasonable?
I would tend to agree, because I mean, it looks like we're removing it anyways. I mean, as we debate that language, as opposed to like present 606 and 607 one time and then do it again.
Yeah.
Later.
Mr. Chair, just one quick question though is, would you have a preference between that and what you brought up as sort of there being a trigger? Or when the change happens?
Chair members, I can certainly ask that question. I mean, I think we'll know more. The meeting is Monday night, so I think we'll know more then. And take some direction from that discussion. Just to be clear, if I did an ordinance to correct or to update, to change this term here to deputy, then I would do that. I would do it all in one ordinance. So I wouldn't have $90, $90, $90. It would be $90. There's no, my preference would be that this gets done at the same time.
And then, as you said,
Or, no, not on May 1st, it would go to the city council by ordinance, but you all could make a recommendation. That timing would probably make sense, chair members. If you all made a recommendation on May 1st, then it would go on a May agenda or something like that.
What you're proposing is that you would change the word. You're proposing that we would change the language from a assistant city manager, deputy city manager in the three places.
Yep.
Or whatever the number is there. And we do that as one thing, and then this kind of rewording would go as on a separate path. Okay. Are people okay with it? Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody any other ideas they want to toss out on things we want to propose? Not hearing anything. Okay.
Right, so as a reminder, the May 1st meeting is the annual meeting. So we're going to be approving the minutes from a bunch of past meetings. And just as a reminder, when you look at those minutes, they've already been through a process back and forth, and you've already been provided with a copy of them. So this is a largely ministerial approval in that they've already been checked a couple of times. But just there's a bunch of them because we've been having these meetings. And then we also do the other sort of annual review type things, or where we have the report from the past year and, things like that. So election of officers. And so if those things are on your mind, you can reach out to me if you're interested in learning more about that. That packet should be coming out. It's pretty much put together. It should be coming out soon. So.
will our pay increase be a part of that?
You're also getting smiles with your handshakes.
Speaking of our pay, I heard that on the 29th of April is the volunteer recognition supper.
Oh, is it?
You can go get whatever the piece of swag is that the city has this year and get fed and talk to people in other commissions. So you got an email on that. It's, I think 4:30, shows us 4:30 to 7 in my calendar. I entered it correctly. Was there anything else for tonight's meeting? If there,
Adjourn?
there's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are.
I was Mark Thorson.
I don't have time to go in. I got my own.
I was